going to go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do is enter into the chat here a link so that you can watch this, this presentation and future ones the first Wednesday of every month live. Welcome to Power Hour. And this is a professional development hour that is offered monthly, as I said. And note the link, and you can register for next month's meeting immediately after this if you like. And not only do we provide these Power Hour sessions to you for free, I should have done some warm-ups with Power Hour, but we also provide full day or multi-day trainings to you and your team from over 3,000 different courses, virtually or in person. So if you're interested in any trainings, you can contact Sheila, and I'll put her email into the chat right now. And then it will also be available at the end of this presentation. So, well, here in Michigan, it is lunchtime. And the lunch hour is the perfect time to discuss dining etiquette. I have a little table setting here that's kind of hard to see, but there's a peek at it. I'll be using those visuals. Dining etiquette. So probably in the last 15 to 18 months, some of us have slacked a little bit, and we're used to turning off our Zoom cameras in meetings and inhaling last night's leftovers, probably straight from the plastic container. Maybe you're even using your bare hands. This is a no judgment zone. I've done it too. I've spent a bulk portion of my last 18 professional months sitting in front of a camera. And I know I've turned mine off to throw back some handfuls of chocolate chips. I've reclined in my lazy boy during lectures. We're coming to a close on that era, I think, and we're beginning to resume meeting face-to-face. The business lunch hasn't resurfaced completely. For any of you who have tried to go to a restaurant, you know that the restaurant industry across the nation is kind of suffering because they can't find help. And so we just need to wait for that to recalibrate. But while it does, you need to get yourself ready. My name is Malinda Petersen. I am known in some professional circles as the Chief Hospitality Officer. Of course, the children I raised simply call me annoying for insisting on respectable table manners. But I learned the art of setting a table and hosting a party from my mother, grandmother, and great aunts who had a handmade linen for every occasion and a utensil for every reason, from crudité forks to jelly spoons. If Martha Stewart invited me to dinner, I would be prepared. So we're going to spend some time today talking about the do's and don'ts of dining out in a professional capacity. Keep in mind that these guidelines are for dining in the United States primarily. Other parts of the world will have their own customs and norms. So take a moment here. This is for those of you who are unfamiliar with Zoom. You can use the chat feature to put your answers in, or there's even a raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen. And if you have something to say, you're certainly welcome to unmute yourself and chat with me. And that would make this so much more lively and entertaining. So the first question is, why are we even offering this presentation? Why does dining etiquette matter? So go ahead, use your chat feature or raise your hand if you would like to contribute. And if not, let me just tell you why. Because etiquette applied anywhere involves awareness, respect, and understanding. And I want to say that again. Awareness, respect, and understanding. That's what good manners are. And they can be applied to all aspects of your life, but we're specifically focusing on dining so that those of us who have turned into savages during the pandemic can recreate. So we dine 3 times a day at least, right? So mealtime is the perfect place to observe how you conduct yourself at the table, which is an indication of how you conduct yourself in the rest of your life. This is why some managers conduct job interviews over a meal. Warren Buffett, you may know, famously conducts his job interviews because he over a meal because he wants to see how people conduct themselves. So, how many of you have eaten a meal within the context of your work? Probably several of you. Yeah, I'm seeing some waving. Yeah. How did you feel? Were you nervous? Were you self-conscious about how you were putting food into your mouth? Absolutely. Okay, absolutely. It is. I've known people in my life who refuse to eat in front of other people. I was that way a little bit in my early 20s too. I just couldn't eat. I was so afraid of something falling out of my mouth or just doing something wrong. It's liberating when you age though, because you care less about those little mistakes that you might make and how they reflect on you. But you need to find a balance. You still do need to be respectable. So if you weren't nervous, that's great. Good for you. But think about what you were doing. Were you talking with your mouth full? Blissfully ignorant to the confines of polite society? This is not Downton Abbey formal, but if you were nervous, a simple and few items I will discuss in the next few minutes should give you confidence. And if you were chewing and chatting synchronously, well, then you definitely need to pay attention. The best place to start is to set the table. And here you can see there's an established placement for utensils and dishes. This is the most basic place setting. These are really all the tools you need, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things to eat a meal. Water is important because we really need to make sure that we're keeping our passageway for our food clean, and it gives us a pause in our chewing. I want to show you the casual setting. It adds a little bit more. The bread plate, the butter spreader, it's adding a wine glass. The napkin is nicely rolled up. Oh, now we've got spoons and an extra fork. And then here, if we want to go uber formal, we get even more knives and forks. And look, they started putting things up here at the top of the table. They added a coffee cup. I'm going to give you the information to arm yourself so that you can feel comfortable knowing what to use and when, if you do sit down to a table that is that formally set. And I've also we've got this cell phone here, and I want you to just think about that for a moment as I continue to talk, and think about where you put your cell phone. Okay. At a restaurant, the plate probably won't be in front of you. It will arrive with your food, but you need to keep a space open for it. And it only makes sense that the entree plate is directly in front of you. And then I'm going to try to share a video with you if my technology allows. For sure, I'm going to put a link to it in the chat so you can watch it later. If what I attempt to do does not work, we'll give it a shot. It's not going to work because I can't share my screen. So do make note of that video. It's just a great, it's like a minute and a half. It is an aerial view of a table setting, and it's put out by the restaurant industry. And they know what they're talking about. So, all right. So how about that cell phone? Where does it go? It does not go on the table. You leave it in your purse, your pocket, your briefcase. You do not need your cell phone on the table for any reason. Okay, so those of you who are asking, but what if I need to know what time it is? You don't need to know what time it is. Checking your watch or some time device is considered rude. You are there on your colleague's schedule. You're done when they say you're done. And also wear a watch and look at that discreetly if it's that important to you. Here's another great question. What's this teaspoon for? You start to see it show up here, casual. And then in the formal setting, you've got it. So generally the rule is that you, with silverware, you work your way from outside in based on the courses. So once you've used a particular utensil, you can see the difference here. I have this is the salad fork. This would also double as a dessert fork later. This is your meal or entree fork. Once you've used those, so you probably are starting with a salad, the server should clear that salad plate away with this fork. Now, we all know not all restaurants do that, but it is ideal, and probably in a business lunch setting, you're at a restaurant. It's not necessarily going to be a Michelin 4-star restaurant, but it is going to be upscale at some level. And this salad fork should be taken away with your salad. And that leaves one fork left. So it's by process of elimination, you know, that's the fork you're going to be using next. Okay. The teaspoon, though, on this end is kind of a little random. But you can see here with this place setting, there is a cup and saucer. If you put poison, as my mom likes to call it, into your coffee, milk, cream, whipping cream, sugar, Splenda, sweetener of any kind, you want something to stir with. And this is kind of your ad hoc piece of silverware at your place setting, and you can grab it and use it for that. When you've finished stirring whatever it is in your cup, simply set your teaspoon down on the saucer. The saucer is there to catch any drips from that beverage and to hold your now used teaspoon. It's important to remember that once you've used a piece of cutlery, it should never return to the table itself. It should stay on your plate in some manner. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, because there are ways to set down your cutlery, your flatware, your silverware, to signal the wait staff where you're at in your meal. Okay, so I talked about the coffee or the tea. What if you don't want coffee or tea? You don't have to have it, but you can signal your wait staff, your server, that you do not want it by turning over your cup so it's upside down, okay? And then they will automatically know you're not going to have coffee or tea, which is fine. A good server, a competent, aware server, will then take that cup and saucer out of your reach, remove it from the table entirely, and then you'll have a little bit more space. Now, there is, you see a wine glass here. Should I do that if I don't want wine? No, that would be considered gauche. And part of the reason is because your wait staff is required to ask you if you want alcohol. And to get some sense of how old you are so that they're pouring it legally. If you don't want it, that is your opportunity to tell them when they ask you. And if you don't want it, sometimes they'll take it away. Okay. Bread plate. Can't you just put your bread on your plate or the table? Okay. I learned a new trick last night, actually, from someone that it's not quite a mnemonic device because you're using your hands. But for those of you who are use the L, which I'm doing backwards now because I'm mirroring you, but the L for knowing your left hand, you can do this with your hands. And when you're looking at your hands, and I'm stealing this from her because I thought it was so fantastic. This makes a B, and your right hand should make a D. Bread is on the left, drinks are on the right. If that helps you, with more practice, you will just know. But oftentimes we're scrunched together, especially at weddings. We've got like 10 people around this big round table that's really just supposed to have 8 people, and everything's a mashup, and nobody knows, well, which, inevitably somebody's going to ask, well, which, is that my bread plate? You will be able to answer that question. It is on your left. So if there is a bread plate, you need to use it. Except if you are dining in France and you can set your bread on the table. Only in France. Otherwise, all food should remain on a plate or in a bowl. And once used, as I said earlier, all silver should be on the plate or the bowl, never on the table. What the heck is this butter knife for? Well, often when you're seated at a table, you get community butter. Now, of course, we know that this may change a little bit because of the pandemic, but it might resurrect itself at some point when we're not so germ phobic. And the butter will be passed probably counterclockwise, but again, it could just be a table making the decision which way you're going to pass food, clockwise or counterclockwise. Honestly, in my research, it depends on the generation you were from. Ideally, you just want the food that's being passed, so the butter, the bread, the water pitcher, carafe, the wine bottle. Make sure that you are playing on the team and everybody knows which way to pass things, and not reaching across the table of 10 that's about 10 feet wide and grabbing for something. Ask someone across from you to just and it should just be passed to you, not handed over everything so you're laid out on the table. So you've got this butter knife, and it's there for the community butter. You will use the butter knife to take some butter, and sometimes actually this butter knife gets passed with the butter, so you might not have the butter knife, and that means you're going to have to put it back with the community butter. So this knife, either way, if it comes with the community butter or it's on your bread plate, you are using this knife to take the butter from the butter dish and to put it onto your butter plate. Now, if it is your very own butter knife, you may use it to spread the butter, or you can set it down and you can pick up your dinner knife and use it to spread. I encourage you to do this if you think that you are going back for more butter. Then we know that you haven't taken a bite out of your dinner roll, spread the butter, maybe your knife, the butter spreader touched where you had taken a bite. And because we are really being understanding and respectful, polite, around the pandemic situation, we want to honor other people's feeling of safety and comfort. And that's something an employer or a colleague will probably notice. What are you doing to protect me? So we don't want double dippers. There's a famous Seinfeld episode around that, around double dipping. So if you need help remembering that it's a no-no, dig up that Seinfeld episode. I wish I had the link. I'd put it in the chat for you. But so both the bread and the butter, once you've taken them from the community dishes, you should set them down on your butter plate. Anything that you're taking from a passing scenario should have a touchdown spot first. It doesn't go from the bread basket straight into your mouth. It touches down. It gives everybody a pause, but you wouldn't have a bag of chips at the table and everybody taking handfuls and eating out of it. Who knows where these hands have been? So let it touch down first so you don't look like a savage or a barbarian. So yeah, that's a lot of rules. And you haven't even really taken a bite out of anything, have you? Now you're probably thinking, forget it, I'm not having a business lunch. A lot of this with practice is something you can get used to and feel comfortable with. So let's talk a little bit about using your silver. In the US, now bear with me here, and I'm emphasizing all of these steps for a reason. I want you to kind of feel the ridiculousness of this. But in the US, we tend to bring food to our mouths with our dominant hand. So, and for most of us, that's right-handed, okay? Yet the fork starts out on the left of your plate. So what do we do in the United States? We pick up the fork on the left and we stab whatever it is that we need to cut on our plate, and then we cut it. Then we rest the knife on the top of the plate. We switch the fork into our other hand. We pick up what we just cut, put it in our mouths, chew, and then we do it again. We reverse from right to left. We pick up our knives, we stab another piece of food, and we cut. For a country that introduced the assembly line for worker efficiency, this seems counterintuitive, okay? I lived in England for about a year, and I learned that Europeans, and when I lived there, they were technically Europeans, but Europeans and the British prefer, in fact, it's almost because their norm is so strong, they get a little bit grossed out, might be too strong of a phrase, but it offends them at some level when you keep passing your silverware back and forth. It seems nonsensical to them. So when in Rome, I've gotten used to doing this, eating the British way, and I'll show you, European way, partly because we're pretty much the only country in the world. We're still using the imperial measurements, the inches and feet and whatever, and which is fine. And we're also eating the hard way. So it is accepted in the United States to eat the European way, and it might elevate your sense of sophistication and class to your dining partner or partners. So what you do is at your place setting, you pick up your fork into your left hand. And of course, this is designed for people who are dominant right-handers. I will put a caveat in here that if you are a lefty, at the beginning of doing this, you want to switch so you can cut with your left hand and then feed yourself with your right hand, go for it. Because you know, as a lefty, that cutting with your right hand just is not, it might not work for you. So it's better to just switch it out. Probably people aren't going to notice. You're going to keep these two pieces of cutlery in your hands for pretty much the entire course, the entree. Okay, so what you're going to do is put your fork into whatever you need to hold still. And you, let's say you have Cornish game hen in front of you. You do a little sawing motion. In both cases, I've got my index finger on the spine of each piece of cutlery. So I'm not doing this. I'm not holding this like a shovel. The fork is pretty much always going to be upside down, which probably seems strange. But again, practice, you'll get used to this. And you're not coming in like a lumberjack to saw a log. You're nicely cutting a small, sizable piece of whatever it is. But in the case of a Cornish game hen or fish with bones or a steak, and if it's a steak, you'd have a steak knife, so it's serrated to cut through that. But you sometimes need to get maybe some chicken skin out of the way, maybe a fish bone. You are set up, you are prepared to do that with this fork. When you are ready to put something in your mouth, you simply stab it with your fork and you help it onto your, use your knife to be the helper and get whatever else on that you would like. Europeans tend to grab things from all around the plate. So if you're one of those people who eats one item at a time until it's gone before going on to the next one, that's fine. You might need a little help lifting. So it's really the cut and pile is what you're doing, and taking it and putting it in your mouth. And again, do yourself a favor and take smaller bites, so that if you do have to have a conversation or it's your turn to talk in the conversation, you're going to be able to chew that what's in your mouth a little and swallow it a little bit quicker so that you can respond. So it's not one of those things where you're sitting there. Oh, yeah. Okay. If you have to, well, let me say this. This again seems like a lot of rules, and I'm just not going to eat. Practice at home. It will give you some confidence. Now, why are all of these rules established in the first place? Silverware has been in the making for more than a millennia, and it really didn't catch on quickly. So just as much as modern day humans are in love with our silverware, our cutlery, our flatware, whatever you refer to it as, and would be kind of disgusted if somebody was eating things like Cornish game hen with their bare hands. The reverse was true thousands of years ago. Resourceful humans before the Industrial Revolution used what was on the ground to get food in their mouth, like shells or chips of wood. That was their vehicle for liquids, say. Africans used food itself, and they still do, in the form of a spongy bread that you tear off a piece, use that kind of like a grabber and grab some of the food and put that into your mouth with the bread. That is still acceptable. For instance, if you eat Ethiopian meals occasionally at Ethiopian restaurants, or you are in Ethiopia, that is pretty much the standard. They don't even usually give you silverware at in an Ethiopian restaurant. So just be aware of this, because you'll sit there, they'll bring out this big tray of food and these big pieces of what looks like a pancake of this spongy bread. And you'll look at them and say, well, okay, oh, I can't start eating because I don't know where my silverware is. And you wait and wait for the server to come back so you can ask for some. Chances are they might not even have any. Chopsticks, another thing where you might go to a restaurant that serves Asian cuisine, and they put out chopsticks and you don't feel comfortable using chopsticks and you ask for a fork and a knife. They may not have that either. So that's something that you should maybe practice with. There are lots of YouTube videos about using chopsticks. Chopsticks were introduced in China about 5,000 years ago. And if you didn't know this, pasta was also introduced in China about 5,000 years ago. And they needed something to twirl and get that food into their mouth. So chopsticks are technically the first formal pieces of cutlery or utensils. They would occasionally be resourceful and use twigs as chopsticks, but then eventually it became an art form and people were whittling or carving chopsticks, and they were easy to carry. It's the other thing, people carried their silverware with them. And you'll find out with the Europeans, it's usually just a knife. In the 14th and 15th century, Europeans traveled with this knife for a variety of reasons. Mostly if they were traveling, they needed some form of defense. So the knife that they're using is their go-to weapon, and they may have used the knife to fend off robbers, to fend off bears. This knife has probably been in bodies, but they're still going to use it to eat. Disgusting to us, made sense to them. It was an efficient tool. But prior to that, 5th and 6th century Greeks had already decided that a two-tine fork was efficient for holding whatever it was you were cutting. The use of the fork spread across the Middle East, modern day Middle East, and then the fork made its way from Greece through the Middle East to Italy around 1,000 years ago. And if you can believe this, its use was considered to be an insult to God. The Italians said, God has provided us with the best of utensils, our fingers. Obviously, it slowly caught on. When the fork arrived in France around the 1530s, they were a scandalous affectation. In the 1600s, forks finally caught on when knives were blunted. Remember, because that knife you were carrying had a sharp edge to kill predators. Cardinal Richelieu actually was instrumental in blunting these knives. And you kind of had to use that fork because you needed to hold it still. The knife wasn't as sharp, okay? The other thing when you're setting a table is to keep, when you set the table, and this is where this derives from now, keep the sharp end or the serrated knife, side of the knife, facing in toward the plate, not out. And this was customary because lots of fights, knife fights, would break out at meals in pubs or whatnot. And by doing this, you were sending a signal to your dining companions that if the blade was facing your plate, you were at peace. If the blade was facing out toward your dining companion, not at peace. It was signaling that I view you as an enemy. So get ready. We might have to fight. And it's a lot harder to fight with a blunted butter knife that's not perforated than it is with a stabbing knife. Eventually, a third and fourth time around the 1700s, they were added because a lot of things fell through. It's like missing your two front teeth. It just needed a little bit more security and leverage because the fork was then also putting things into your mouth. And eventually people did stop traveling so much. And they stopped traveling with their own utensils because around early 1900s, stainless steel was invented. And guess what became a status symbol for people to own before the car was a status symbol? If you had multiple sets of dining utensils, if somebody came into your home and you could offer them their own plate, like to borrow your plate, to borrow your silverware, oh, you were a successful person, okay? Now, Americans around the 1800s had been using spoons to hold in the place of what a fork does now. And so, and actually what they were doing is they were using the handle of the spoon and putting it into whatever they were cutting. And then that would get dirty, right? And you turn it around, pass it to your other hand, and you're just a mess because this has been holding. So Americans actually were like, yes, thank you for the fork. The world also became more civilized. Household items became a convenience, the show of wealth, as I mentioned. And once this caught on, just the simple knife, fork, and spoon, people decided, hey, if we can have a fork for our steak or our fish or our main entree, why can't we have a fork for our salad that comes out first? Why can't we have a soup spoon? So this is all human construct. And whether you like it or not, it's what we've grown to accept as part of our norm. So let's get back. I thought you might appreciate some of the origins of why we do what we do to help explain the rules a little bit better. We haven't had the rules for a long time. We really haven't. So I forgot to show you this slide. I call this slide Odyssey, A Brief History of Utensils, because if you've seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, this set of silverware that they use in this 1968 film was actually designed a decade earlier by Arne Jacobsen, who is a Danish designer. And he maintained that his design philosophy was a function over form, and that the way these pieces of cutlery were designed were the most adaptable for human hands to hold and to fit into our mouth. They still make this setting. It's still available today. And then this little guy over here, if you ate at KFC in the 60s and 70s, you know that what that is. It's a spork. And the Colonel Sanders did not invent that. It was actually somebody in well-to-do New York society who had invented it when there was, hey, we need a crudité fork and we need a jelly spoon and we need all of this. He invented it as a useful tool, highly functional, because it could do two things, stab and lift. and he got the patent on that in around 1874. It didn't really take off until Colonel Sanders used it, brought it into his restaurant, but he is not the inventor of that. So if you need that for Trivial Pursuit, you now have that information. Okay, I'm going to give you a close-up of Arnie Jacobson's flatware because I didn't do that. And here where they're using it. Talking to Hal and eating their lunches on those cafeteria style trays, which also took off from that point. So, and these are the 2-tine forks I was referencing. They're not going to hold a lot. They're definitely good at stabbing. Those are some sharp tools. And this represents a knife that people carried it around. It was in a sheath to keep it clean, but you know, how clean was it after it had killed the bear? All right, let's get back to that business lunch, okay? Let me go here. Actually, took you too far. We're gonna go home. We're not going home. Bear with me. Okay. You're at your restaurant. You're going to be seated by the host. There is something that you should automatically do once you sit down at your table. Take this handy dandy napkin and put it in your lap. I don't have food yet. What am I protecting myself from? You just need to be prepared. And if you have water and there's humidity such that there's condensation, we've all had that water condensation drip down onto our laps and land in a very precarious position so that when we stand up later to use the restroom or leave the restaurant, we look ridiculous or are very worried that we look ridiculous. So, you'll be prepared and you won't be panicking if you have your napkin in your lap. So probably at this point, the server is going to come over and take your drink order. And the polite thing to do is to order water for you and your guest or guests, okay? You don't need to order anything else. You're not going to presume anything. Chances are you will not be ordering alcohol at this meal. In fact, I encourage you to not order alcohol at this meal. Stick with water or iced tea. And there's several reasons for that. Well, one, you don't want the alcohol because it might look like you have a problem. It also gives us more courage than we would otherwise have sometimes. And we want to maintain control of our faculties. You really want to be on your best behavior. You don't want to be saying something that you don't. The other thing to stay away from is a soda. And the reason is because when you're talking a lot, you're taking in a lot of air, which then can cause you to need to release that air at some point by burping. When you add the carbonation of a soda, that's doubling those chances. And you don't want to be sitting there silently burping throughout the meal. If you do have to burp, you simply place your napkin in front of your mouth and it should hide all of this and then put it back, okay? If you're eating slower, you're less likely to take in so much air, and that can help you too. And if you have to burp, even before your food's arrived, you've already got that napkin in your lap, okay? Don't try to not burp. You're just gonna cause yourself problems. We're human beings, we do burp, but just try to lessen that, that from happening. Your colleague arrives, you're already at the table, they arrive to the table, stand up. But when you stand up, remember you have something in your lap. You're going to need to grab it with your left hand and hold on to it because probably you're going to extend your right hand out, okay? And this is what I didn't want you panicking about earlier, is that the shaking of the hands, we don't really know what to do right now, do we? Some of us are like, well, I'm shaking hands. I haven't shook a hand in 18 months. I'm shaking it. And that's just how I greet people. You're going to have to take your cues from your guest, and you want to honor and respect and be aware, right? Being polite of what it is that they are going to reciprocate with. A simple head nod and a smile is fine. Don't let this make you panic. We're all, if we're at a business lunch, we're all aware and competent enough to know he's not putting his hand out. She's not putting her hand out. Don't offer yours. Okay? Just wait for their cues. Okay, you're going to sit down again. You're going to put your napkin back in your lap, and you're going to order. Well, you'll probably have some chit chat a little bit. The exchanging of pleasantries that I refer to. So you take a few moments to look at your menu, what you should have done if you got there earlier, or even because of the internet, probably looked at the menu for the restaurant before you even arrived. So you're not spending a lot of time looking at the menu to see what it is that you want to order. All right, you're at a business lunch. You may not eat your whole meal for various reasons, because you're nervous, that your colleague wants to take off earlier, you didn't have time to eat it all. Having this meal is not, do not think of it as the meal that's going to sustain you. If you are so hungry after this lunch, stop at McDonald's on your way back to the office or whatever. You do not need to rely on this meal to serve as your full lunch. Okay, I put here some things to be aware of. So we've got this steak. It's probably a filet mignon, and it's served so pretty. It's probably pricey. Don't be that person that orders the most expensive thing on the menu, especially if you know that you're not going to be the one that's paying for it. Okay, you want to show that you are respectful and a good steward of your colleagues' money, or if you are paying for it via the company credit card, you want to be a good steward of your company's money. Okay, your boss does not want to see expenses turned in for filet mignon for $6 at noon on a Tuesday. It's just probably not okay. Other things you should stay away from, messy things. This is what I call food you should not have on a first date. You want to be looking to order first date food. Ribs, not it. Spaghetti, not it. You're just asking for trouble. I found that quiche might be the best way to go if they have it. It's just easy to get to your mouth. There's not a lot of it. It's usually served with a small side salad, which salads are easy to eat. There's also what I call winner chicken dinner. Just order the chicken. Just remember, you're not there. Maybe you've never been to this restaurant. You're so excited to try it. Do that with your spouse or your girlfriends or guy pals at some other time. That's not what this is for. This meal is to just get you through the business at hand, whatever that might be. Not picking up burgers, not eating French fries with your fingers. My mom is watching. She, I'm sure, is thinking of the time that she and my dad took me to the fanciest restaurant in town and made me eat my French fries with a fork at the age of 12. I did not eat my French fries on principle. I think she's forgiven me. Okay. conversation. What do you talk about? That will depend on why you are dining together. Is this your boss? Is this a formal review? Who asked to have the meal? How well do you know each other? But once you've ordered, you are going to have to talk about something. And most likely, we know that we are asking for trouble if we bring up politics, religion, and right now in this day and age, probably about a dozen other topics. So we also know what topics are safe. The weather. Boring, who cares? At least you're not saying something that's going to offend your companion. And when you're in doubt, the best thing to do is to ask your dining companion a question about them. We all like to talk about our favorite subject, which is I or me. It's what we know the best. Give them a chance to talk. You don't need to be talking, probably. If you do, keep your answers short and sweet. If you know your colleague has kids, especially young ones, oh, is little so-and-so walking yet? Of course, they don't like to talk about themselves. They sure as heck like to talk about their kids. All right, the meal arrives. We've covered how to use your utensils. Unless your dining companion's meal has not arrived at the same time, the two of you can begin. And actually, this is the easy part. You eat, you talk, you remain aware of your behavior as well as your colleagues. You feel something on the corner of your mouth, you wipe it off. Pay attention to what you're doing and what your colleague is doing. Small bites, small bites, small bites. Chew with your mouth closed. Don't talk with your mouth full. Probably all things you heard your parents say a bazillion times when you were growing up. But we get lax. We do. And it's just good to be conscious of that. So the meal is over. Ooh. Here we go with my crazy slides again. I'm going to need to just move ahead. This is a new tool for me, and I'm learning how to use it and how not to use it. And we did that. We're not quite there. We're not quite there. I might just skip the side. No, here we go. Keep in mind, take small bites. Chew with your mouth closed and swallow before talking. You don't have to finish your meal, but you do need to finish when your companion finishes. And those of us who are conscious and frugal and worried about the environment, we like to take any leftovers home. I'd say you just want to avoid that unless your dining companion is also insisting that you do, go for it. Okay. You're going to finish your meal. Steak is done. You are finished. You say you are finished with your meal. And you cue to your server that you are finished with your meal because you have finally put down your fork and your knife on your plate at about 4 o'clock. Okay. Some people maintain that the fork needs to face down for this. Some maintain that it can be up. As long as it's at 4 o'clock at an angle, your server should know that you are finished. If you are still eating and have to get up to leave the table, which I also highly encourage you not to do, you would rest your knife and your fork on either side of your plate at 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Okay. And then your napkin would go to the side of the table or to the side of your place setting, not on your dirty plate. Same for when you are finished with the meal. Your napkin, you can remove it from your lap finally and just place it, fold it up a little bit and place it to the side, or you can even set it on the seat of your chair. If you are going to the restroom during the meal, put your napkin kind of across the back of your chair, and the server will also know you're coming back. The very last thing that you need to keep in mind when you are dining is when you stand up to leave the table and set your napkin down and your utensils down, you need to look your dining companion in the eye and say, thank you. If you don't do anything else, this is what's important. So I've gone a little long. It's exactly 1 o'clock. But if there are questions, say about dessert, coffee service, the check, you're welcome to put that in the chat. And I see, is it improper when eating pasta to twirl the pasta into a ball around your fork, or is it better to cut the pasta into small pieces? Well, Italians would say that you would twirl it into the pasta spoon. You might, sometimes you're served this. Let me just go back to it just being me over here. You can hold if you're eating pasta, you won't need the knife. These become your two utensils, and you can twirl it into the spoon. And then a lot of people would probably find it to be gauche to be cutting the pasta, because it's sacred in some places. It's just a no-no. Yeah. How do you let the host know you can't partake in a particular dish they are offering due to medical reasons without insulting them or letting everyone else in on your health issues? Well, if you got to the restaurant first, you can alert them ahead of time, but you just need to communicate it. You can say, I just want you to know, kind of in a hushed tone. You can lean in when they come and say, I'm not supposed to have, or I can't eat. And the good server will honor that and say, okay, not ask a bunch of questions about, oh, why can't you eat shrimp? Because you're right. Nobody wants to know all your health issues while you're dining. That's, again, not with it's too much information. But it's okay to say what you can't have in front of your dining companion. It's probably not okay to say why and read out your medical chart. So, any other questions? If not, I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining Power Hour. It's been a presentation by the National Corporate Training Solutions Company. This is a professional development hour that we do monthly on the first Wednesday of the month at noon Eastern Time. And if you would like to join us for future Power Hour sessions, you can join us using the link that's here in your chat, which, because there's not a lot in the chat, you can just scroll up and grab it now before the Zoom session closes. And if you would like to book your own soft skills training, whether it's dining etiquette or another topic you might have in mind, email Sheila B at nctscorp.net.